Hello everyone, this is your tea master Sabrina. Welcome to the Teahouse PoTcast, where we talk about anything and everything about language learning. Today, in our pop culture series, we are looking into how all of our fandom obsessions help with our language learning. We have applied linguist Alex here to enlighten us. Welcome to the Teahouse, Alex.
Hello, Sabrina. Thank you for having me, and I must say this tea is delicious.
Now, Alex, I grew up in the late 90s when television series and internet were becoming accessible, and I definitely learned a lot of vernacular English and culture from watching my favorite shows, spending time on the show forums, and reading fanfictions. That being said, I know that parents and maybe teachers consider it as wasting time, and sometimes people would say something negative or give us a funny look when we talk about it. What would you say to educators, parents of adolescent learners, and adult learners if they say forums and fanfiction are just waste of time, that they have no language learning values?
Well, first of all, I would tell them that the idea of fan fiction goes way back to Sherlock Holmes and Jane Austen fans, forming writing clubs to create new plots and rewrites of the original texts. Now, we all know that language teachers encourage students to engage with the target language as much as they can, and forum and fanfiction certainly provides those opportunities, either for the lurkers or active forum commentators or fanfiction writers of all levels.
Oh, yeah. I can tell you that I have done my share of lurking on the forum sites, just reading comments from people all over the world. Never really posted anything or joined in the discussions. But I still read fanfictions that are written by fans from different walks of life. Some are L1 English speakers of different countries, and for some, English is not their primary language. For many of us, it's a safe space, I guess, especially for learners to engage with the language in different levels. They feel comfortable without being judged on how well they write, about the spelling, or if the grammar is wrong. And just, it's nice to have a choice on reading the stories that I liked.
And that's right. Many studies have looked at how engaging in fanfiction have different positive implications for learners, linguistically, psychologically, emotionally, and in a social cultural sense. First off, linguistically. Now, it benefits even for lurkers like you. You are able to have access to different types and levels of English, different genres and styles of English composition. For the fanfiction writers who are also language learners, a lot more active engagement is going on. For example, the writer has to be able to analyze and interpret the plot of the story, the depth of the characters to see which part or which character compels them to write. Once they have finished their draft, they don't just hit the post button. Many writers, regardless of experience, they share, read, and do peer review for each other. Some even have beta readers to check their work. Many feel comfortable with feedbacks from readers, and some have their own fiction followers. Even the interactions within the comment sections provide language learners a chance to use the target language.
It's always a bummer to have to wait for a new chapter from a good fanfic writer, but yeah, knowing how much that goes into each piece before they hit that publish button certainly makes sense. I think some authors even started collaborating with each other. I can't imagine the amount of negotiating involved. That in itself is a great language practice. I believe some authors even do fanfic translations from English into their own primary language, just so that the local fandom members have access to the English fanfics. Personally, I can never tell if English wasn't the author's first language unless the author puts it in the disclaimer or author notes, which is quite common these days, but I kind of don't look at the disclaimers anymore.
Having delved into the fanfiction websites, we noticed the language disclaimer as well. Some studies have found that it is a way for them to negotiate the type of feedback the author was open to receiving from the readers with respect to the content or the style of the story. As to the fanfic translators, that takes a lot more work, and certainly these members have worked in embracing their multilingual identity. Many also inspire others as well.
I can't imagine the amount of time to read and translate and making sure the members of local fandom understands. It takes a lot of linguistic and cultural understanding of both languages, and geez, the discipline. But so, what does that mean in terms of their identity as language learners, as authors of fanfic, with the English is not my first language disclaimer in their fanfiction?
Well, despite those disclaimers that seem to show insecurity, research has shown that the experience in fandom and fanfic writing activities still has positive effects on the learner's identity. For many of these learner authors, being a part of the fandom gives them emotional support through their interaction with others that they view as role models. Through these interactions, they are also exposed to current and pragmatic use of the language, as well as the underlying cultural practices and beliefs that could come up during the interactions with other members of the fandom from all over the world.
In other words, we could say that being a member of the fandom and as an active language user and creator is a big self-esteem booster, form of validation to be seen as a member of the target language, right?
Exactly. Was that your own experience as well?
I can definitely relate to the confidence booster factor. Even as a lurker back then, I learned a lot of the idioms, cultural references, humor, and social issues. Lots of the fandom members would have discussions on social issues that came up in the show's storyline or the fanfic, and most people took their time to explain anything that we, the ESL members, might not understand.
Yeah, that was our experience as well with the current fandom and fanfic communities. The overall interaction that members have is pretty positive, and each communities have policies and rules of conduct, which helps say if you were an adolescent learner, especially, and you certainly have to learn to follow the rules and policies in order to stay as a member, the feeling of belonging and being included. Otherwise, you can get kicked out and blocked out of the forum or fanfic sites.
I guess parents of adolescent learners who are into fandoms might be happy to know that their children are getting practice on following rules and disciplines, right?
Right, I suppose it might not be something they were expecting as part of the fandom community.
Right. So I remember that many members also started meeting in person, either just meet up for viewing the show together if they were local or meet up during conventions. Back then, conventions were just in the infant stage. Now they're a big deal for the fans and for the creators of the shows, video games, or comics as well.
Yeah, many of the online fandom interactions have become in person meetups and friendships. For many of the language learners, it seemed to help them to have the confidence in using the target language in general. In one of the study interview, the fanfic translator participants said,
I'm more confident now. I watch English TV series and understand what they say. I remember having a hard time speaking English, but now I'm confident I can engage in a conversation.
in another study, one of the fanfic participants felt that she had a difficult time making friends when she first moved to Canada, but after becoming a member of the fandom, first as a lurker, then a fanfic writer, she started to have a network of friends. Another participant said that because of her online connection from the fandom, it helped change her socialization in real life.
So, to recap, we have looked at how involvement in fandom and fanfic is good for language learners themselves, and perhaps some bonus point in convincing some parents' view on the topic. But what about teachers? What would you say to educators who might still prefer to stick to the textbook?
I'm glad you asked. Well, including fan fiction in the classroom would help increasing learners' interest and motivation, especially if there are freedom for them to choose. Fan fiction can be used as an option for reading comprehension, writing summary, plot prediction, minor character backstory, practicing different narrative perspective.
Right, but what if an educator says, well, I don't know which fandom or know much about fandom, what then?
That's a good question. One of the suggestions that came up in our research is that teachers can have the students as the expert in sharing their own fandom experience with their peers and teachers. It can be verbal or written or a combination of verbal and visual. At the end of the day, I would say the crucial elements educators are aiming for is the intrinsic motivation, the self confidence, and eventually help students in developing their self directed and autonomy in a successful language learning journey.
I think with that, Alex has given us the best conclusion for today. But before we end the episode, sometimes we ask our guests to pose 3 questions to our listeners. Can be loosely related to our topic, and we will reveal the answer in our next episode. So, Alex, if you can do us the honor, please.
Okay, we are looking for answers in the TV fandoms. Number 1. TV show Once Upon a Time was filmed in Richmond. What is the general term for fans of the show? Number 2. Star Trek fans are called what? Number 3. Who are the Xenites?
Awesome. Thank you, Alex, for sharing your passion and validating my adolescent English learning experience.
Well, it was my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
And we're sending Alex off with our best tea. And to our listeners, see you until next tea time. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.